Pues yo tengo una copia. Yo tengo una copia si quieres.
No, todavía no.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jan Soifer. I'm chair of the Travis County Democratic Party, and I want to thank you all for being here and welcome you. Obviously, this is an important issue for many of us. It's an issue that a lot of people in our community care about. I'm particularly grateful to you all for being here, and also to our esteemed panelists for participating, particularly our Sheriff Hamilton, taking the time out of his schedule to be here. I also want to send a shout out to Senator Gonzalo Barrientos, who's here in this wonderful facility named for his late wife, who put a lot of effort into making sure that this beautiful venue was created. I also want to mention a couple of other people. Vince Harding is here. He's the secretary of the Travis County Democratic Party. Joe Desotel over here is the communications director. He's probably taking pictures of those on social media. Stella Savage is here. She is our voter outreach, voter coordination person who helped us get something around 7,000 voters registered on the last day of voter registration. She's still probably resting up from a week ago today. Why are we here tonight? We are here, you know, we are here because this is an important issue. It's one that a dialogue started about within the Travis County Democratic Party in the County Executive Committee meeting a number of months ago. A resolution was passed by the CEC calling on our county to try to deal with this issue and asking that the county stop cooperating with ICE and the federal authorities in deporting so many of Austin's residents. This, of course, is an issue that's gone on for many years, and it's an issue that is not without controversy. And I know that that we are a community that engages sometimes in heated dialogue, and that can be healthy. But I think it's also important that we engage in respectful dialogue. And I know that our panel members would do that. I know our audience will do that as well. These panel members are our invited guests. You all as well understand the sensitivity around some of these issues. So I hope that we are here to listen to one another, to understand where we're coming from, and to see if there is a way that we can come closer together. And so with that, let me just say a couple more things. One is Senator Barrientos brought me these flyers. I left several dozen of them right outside the door. It's a Tejano dancing rally with Senator Leticia Vandepute this Sunday, October 19th from 5:30 to 11 at Midnight Rodeo. And I hope everybody will grab one of these flyers. It's a fundraiser, but it's a $10 a person minimum. So hopefully there'll be a big crowd there supporting Senator Vanderputte, and I hope you'll all consider coming. Secondly, let me say how much I appreciate Christian Caballero, who is the Diversity Outreach Director for the Travis County Democratic Party, who put this panel together and this event together. And I'm going to turn the moderation of this panel over to Christian. But first, I think that the translators had a few words they wanted to give you. So as they come up here, let me just say again, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to the dialogue tonight. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Rocio Villalobos, and this is my interpreting partner, Susana Pimiento.
Buenas tardes, soy Rocio Villalobos y compañera de interpretación Susana Pimiento.
We were invited here because the organizers of the event thought it was important to make sure that the information that was presented, the testimonies that y'all are hearing, would be available in the languages that people here speak.
Estamos aquí porque los organizadores de este evento pensaron que era importante que las ideas que se presentaban aquí estuvieran en el idioma y que las personas se sintieran cómodas en hablar.
We're committed to making this a multilingual space and a multilingual event, so we'll be doing interpreting off to the side. If you hear people talking, it's probably us, so be patient and be careful.
Estamos comprometidos en hacer de este evento un evento multilingüe, entonces vamos a estar del lado haciendo la interpretación, entonces si nos oyen, por favor tengan paciencia y también colaboración.
Todos los que tienen equipo de interpretación pueden alzar la mano para saber nosotros. Ok, entonces ahorita el equipo ya debe de estar en el canal que necesitan para escuchar. Todo lo que necesitan hacer es prenderlo. Ya lo sintonizamos y vamos a estar traduciendo durante el evento. I think the other thing to just keep in mind is that if we, for the panelists, if we make this motion to you, it means to slow down, and it'll help us with interpreting to make sure that you're not going too quickly for us to be able to interpret for the folks that are listening.
Sí, para los panelistas, por favor, tener en cuenta que hacemos estas señales para que vayan un poco más despacio para poder hacer la interpretación correcta.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for being here. As Jan Soifer said, I am the political director for Travis County Democratic Party, and it's my pleasure to focus on diversity outreach and organize events like this to create spaces where we can have dialogue on important issues that affect the community at large. And so we'll go ahead and just introduce the panel quickly. Right here we have Sheriff Greg Hamilton. We have Major Darren Long. We have Satinder Singh from ACLU. Amelia Fischer from Texas Civil Rights Project. Alejandro Caceres from Austin Immigrant Rights Coalition. And Bob Libal from Grassroots Leadership. And as far as conducting this panel and making sure that we have enough time for everything, I'm going to give 1 minute each to each speaker as they pass down the microphone for each question. And I will be using hand signals, so this means 1 minute, this means half a minute left, and of course this means time's up. There will be some flexibility once the time is up. I'm not going to completely cut you off. I want you to finish your last sentence or your last thought, but please try to keep time in mind so that we get enough time for everyone to participate. And other than that, we'll go ahead and get started. Bob, since you're conveniently next to the microphone over there, can you go ahead and pick that up and test it out?
check.
Can everyone hear okay? So the first question, which is followed with a sub-question, is what is secure communities and how does it work? Is it optional or mandatory?
Sure, so thanks Christian and the Democratic Party for putting this together and for everybody for being here on the panel. So secure communities, and I'll probably leave most of this to the lawyers on the panel, but secure communities basically is a fingerprinting program whereby the federal government, whereby local authorities send fingerprints that people who are booked into the county jail to the federal government. First to the Department of Justice and then over to the Department of Homeland Security, which then puts down the detainer on someone who's detained in the Travis County jail or in many jails around the country. That first part of the program, the fingerprinting and the sending to the federal government, that's not a voluntary part of the program. That's something that happens automatically. The voluntary part of the program and what has caused people to opt out of honoring ICE detainers is that honoring the ICE detainer in the county jails, allowing immigration to come in to put a hold on someone and honor that ICE detainer, and it's those ICE detainers that have resulted in 19 deportations a week in Travis County since the program began here. Sorry, you should, yeah.
Is that the same question?
Yeah, so you'll be answering the same question and just passing the microphone down.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being here. Right. So to just go off some of the box here, yeah, secure communities, the program fingerprinting weapon, we're what we are. Is that better? Thank you. What we're arguing right is that it's the holding of the immigrant community that is leading up to the separation of families, right? The crisis that is happening right now in the immigrant community because of the fact that we can't actually trust the local law enforcement because local law enforcement now looks to us as if they are immigration. That is our major issue, right? That local law enforcement is holding people without probable cause, is holding people without a warrant, and detaining them for whatever 48 hours longer than they're supposed to be holding them, right? So that's kind of all I want to add, right? I'm pretty sure the attorneys will be able to clear this up for you a little more.
I'm really glad that you asked this question because there's been a lot of confusion, and I think it's sort of a complicated program. And so to break it down really simply, I know that Bob already said this, but there are two parts to this program. Part number one is fingerprint sharing. That's the Secure Communities program, right? That's the part that happens automatically, and that's the part that is not voluntary, right? Now, the other part about it, on the front end, what is the law enforcement agency's responsibility, and in this case, the Travis County Sheriff's responsibility, is to decide whether to actually hold somebody once immigration indicates that it has an interest in the person. Now, basically what happens is that when ICE gets the fingerprints, it decides whether it wants to place a detainer on somebody, not probable cause, not anything like that, usually based on foreign place of birth, Hispanic last name. And if ICE decides to place the detainer, it's up to the law enforcement agency whether to continue to hold the person, again, without probable cause, to allow ICE time to come, pick the person up, and put them in deportation proceedings.
Just to add a bit of a wrinkle in terms of what we mean by voluntary, and what the previous panelists have said is absolutely accurate. The first part is not voluntary in that once you book somebody and you run their fingerprints through the FBI system, it goes over to ICE and they check it against their database. But local law enforcement can make a determination over whether to run the fingerprint through FBI or just to keep it locally, right? And for example, some localities have chosen to not run that against low-level crimes like not having an ID or something like that. So really, in some respect, both parts of it can be voluntary, and the sheriff's hands are not tied.
I'll maybe let the sheriff answer most of this question, but I do want to clarify what some of these things are not completely accurate. We have to report fingerprinting to through DPS, it automatically goes through FBI and the databases for everything above Class C misdemeanors. And let me explain the process just a little bit. After through that process, it identifies someone in a database or isn't. It notifies the local ICE office and gives them a list. Those ICE agents come inside the jail and interview somebody before they place the detainer normally. That's the way the process works.
Well, I'm really happy that Amelia and Bob straightened out about the secure communities, the fingerprint portion. A lot of folks, as I did reading in the newspaper, have been disingenuous with the way this program operates. But as far as the ICE detainer, when we run these fingerprints, we automatically send them to DPS. DPS sends them to FBI. FBI opens up the portal to all of their sister agencies to look at the different prints. At that particular time, the only individuals that would be identified by the fingerprints are individuals that have come in contact before with ICE. Otherwise, their fingerprints would not be a part of it.
Okay, so moving on to the next sub-question. Does it require local funds and resources to implement this program here locally?
Well, you had sent this question and I researched it, and I want you to know that Travis County has been activated with secure communities since June 16, 2009. Since that time, the Sheriff's Office budget has increased from $124.2 million in 2009 to $155.7 million in 2014. This increase is not attributable to the Secure Communities program because the only impact this would have on our system relates to the jail population, as the only thing TCSO does related to this program is honor detainers. So there's no cost associated with this. In 2008, the average daily population was 2,512. In 2009, our ADP, our average daily population, went down to 2,363. And for 2013, we're even down further at 2,362 inmates, our average daily population in our jail.
I'm going to let Bob answer most of this question because he's got some specific numbers in terms of cost. But one thing that I did want to clarify, Sheriff Hamilton said that only the people with the fingerprint match, so people who have been fingerprinted by ICE, only those people get detainers, and that's actually not true. You can get detainers in either that situation, which, by the way, doesn't mean fingerprinted for enforcement purposes. It could mean fingerprinted because you applied for some sort of benefit. That's scenario 1 for a detainer. Scenario 2 for a detainer is if there is no match. ICE doesn't have the fingerprints in its databases, right? But ICE thinks that maybe you could be in the country with authorization. That's not probable cause, that's not reasonable suspicion. Typically what it boils down to is Hispanic last name or foreign place of birth.
Well, my response was that secured communities, as far as issuing a detainer through secured communities, you had to have been in contact with ICE before. All the rest of these things, we have individuals that come in and they interview. They interview individuals that have not have come in contact with ICE before, and they determine at that time that they want to put an ICE detainer. But the secured communities, the digital fingerprints, the only way that you will have contact is that you've had contact with them before.
That is factually incorrect according to ICE's website itself.
I was going to get some water, sorry. Yeah, so I would again let Bob answer this question, right, because he does have the report. But if we are holding folks for longer than they're supposed to be held, right, or we are holding folks and not letting them pay bond, we are, of course, using local resources. It just logically makes sense if we're holding folks for 48 hours longer. That means that folks have to be there, folks have to be guarded, that means that we are providing food, we are providing life, right? So we are actually using local resources. Not let Bob get into the details of that, right?
Sure, and Sheriff, I think you should be commended for reducing the overall jail population, right? I mean, that's something that I think is in the best interest of everyone in the community. However, when it comes to people with immigration holds in the Travis County Jail spend substantially longer in the jail than people on the same charge above and beyond 48 hours that immigration puts a hold on them. And the reason for that is because judges won't provide bond for people with immigration holds. And so what we found in this report that we put out earlier this year is that in 2012 and 2013, in just those 2 years, that the average length of stay for someone with an ICE detainer was dramatically higher on all classifications of crime, right? So for a Class C misdemeanor, for a Class B misdemeanor, for a Class A misdemeanor, a person spent 17.5 days longer on average than if they had an immigration hold than if they didn't have an immigration hold. That results in a significant number of people who are in the Travis County Jail who otherwise wouldn't be there. If it wasn't for these immigration holds, we would have a substantially lower average daily population. We'd be able to save more money, and the sheriff wouldn't need to go to the county commission and ask for a raise. And I'll get into more of what the actual cost is later on.
One of the things I'd like to say is that individuals have the ability. When this discussion started years ago, I was told it's a different group now that's coming forward, but I was told that individuals that have an ICE detainer are unable to bond out. We have people bonding out, paying bond on a daily basis. So that's 17 days. If that individual gets a bond and they want to pay that bond, they can bond out or attempt to bond out. But if they have an ICE detainer, we will turn them over to ICE. So the ICE detainer is resulting in people staying at that longer rate of time, even lower average daily population if you weren't honoring ICE detainees.
Okay, wow, this one's louder. So moving on to another sub-question. Are any of these resources, local resources, used for legal proceedings or provide compensation to separated families? Bob, you want to go ahead and use your microphone?
Well, and I'll just say that the cost of this program that we estimated, and there's wildly different numbers, as Judge Bisco knows, on what the average daily cost of a jail day is, whether it's $60-some or over $100. But using the various points, the average, what we estimated is that we spent between $3.8 and $7.6 million over the last 2 years of Travis County resources to subsidize holding people longer than they would have been held had they not had ICE detainers. So it's a significantly expensive program for Travis County taxpayers.
I'm sorry, can you ask the question again? I'm actually not clear what you just asked.
Yeah, I combined the sub-questions to the first question, which is, do any of these resources provide any aid for legal proceedings or any compensation for separated families?
That I know of, it does not provide any compensation for separated families, right? I mean, yeah, and it doesn't actually provide any sort of legal resources because under our draconian immigration laws, right? Folks are taken away from, due process is taken away from them, right? You don't actually need to have an immigration attorney. One, if you cannot afford one, then you do not have one. And this is the kind of system that we're helping out by incarcerating folks, by holding them longer, and by then transferring them to Pearsall, right? We're helping the quicker way of deporting folks, right? I know it does not provide any sort of resources for the families that are left here, right? That are left here as single parents, or left here as kids without their parents, and that's something that we've been working on, right, as the Austin Immigrant Rights Coalition, is that there is an actual, a hotline that the community has created, because we've seen that there is no support for the families that are left here. So we've created a hotline where folks can call and get resources, get resources to attorneys, get resources to if they need help paying rent, if they need food, because it is leaving our immigrant community in a crisis where folks aren't able to provide themselves because they have to have a whole bunch of money for bond, right?
So ESCOM, no, it doesn't provide any sort of resources for legal proceedings or compensation. In fact, it provides no money to localities that comply with ICE detainers. So there is this program called the SCAP program, and that through the SCAP program, ICE reimburses localities for money for certain undocumented people that they're holding in the jail, but definitely not all of the people that are held on ICE detainers, which means that that's on the county's dime. And quickly, the other thing that I wanted to add, just another clarification point. When we're talking about ICE detainers and immigration getting involved with people at the jail, we're talking about two different systems, right? We have the criminal justice system over here, and we have the immigration enforcement system over here, and they're totally different. A lot of the way that I've heard this painted is people try to conflate immigration with public safety to scare people. And so what happens is that people paint this picture of, violent felons being let out free of our jails, and that's just not the case, right? Everyone who goes into the criminal justice system is assessed a bond or not bond, and there are procedural safeguards in place to determine whether somebody is a public safety risk to the community. ICE and ICE detainers have absolutely nothing to do with public safety.
I just wanted to point out another cost. In addition to ICE not reimbursing the cost of detainers and coming in and interviewing folks, they also don't indemnify law enforcement agencies that are sued as a result of violations pertaining to the detainer. So, for example, in Colorado, the ACLU sued a local law enforcement agency that after a detainer, they kept the person there well after 48 hours, right? Just because ICE had come and picked them up, right? And that seems like it's ICE's fault, but ICE did not pay the legal costs, right? That was borne by the taxpayers, and that's the same here.
To clarify something, we honor all law enforcement detainers. That includes from other states, which in a governor's warrant process can take up to 90 days for them to come pick them up. Other counties within the state of Texas, they have up to 10 days to come pick them up. We are releasing these after they've disposed of all local charges, in most cases within 24 hours. ICE picks them up.
Okay, going on to the second major question. How has secure communities affected the community at large? For example, has it increased the local budget to enforce the program? You spoke a little bit about that, Greg Hamilton. Do you want to go ahead? So, do you want to pass on to Satinder then?
I'll let Bob talk about that a little bit, because again, he's the one with the numbers. But in terms of the Travis County Jail honoring all detainers from states, from other federal agencies, let's make another clarification point here. There are ICE detainers, and then there are other criminal detainers. ICE detainers are not based on probable cause, the way that other state detainers or federal detainers are. Okay, so ICE cleverly uses the term detainer to sort of cover itself and make it look like probable cause exists for holding people in the jail for longer than they should be, and that's just not the case. The ICE detainer is not held up to the same standards as other detainers that Major Longs talked about.
Well, I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but if people with ICE detainers spend more than 78,000 additional jail days in the Travis County Jail than people who were put in on the same charges who didn't have ICE detainers, that cost, if you estimate it out, is between $3.8 and $7.3 million. That's in 2012 and 2013 combined. That's significant savings that Travis County taxpayers could earn, right, should we not be honoring this program, as more than 250 other localities around the country have stopped doing. Additionally, that's just the direct costs, right? I mean, people from the immigrant rights community, people from the immigrant community know this far better than I do. There are so many indirect costs when we're separating 19 families a week, right? These are breadwinners, these are brothers, these are sisters, these are mothers, these are fathers, right, who are separated from their loved ones. And This is a voluntary program. It's voluntarily that we're doing this, and we don't have to.
You know, one of the things we keep talking about, the 19 families that we separate during the time, I think, 2009 to 2000, I think it was 2012. During that same time, we sent 12,232 people to the penitentiary. Those families are separated also. And I'm apathetic with them, just like I'm apathetic with the individuals, the 19 families. But I am, one of the things that I constantly hear is that individuals are asking us not to work with ICE. And I think that that is not good thinking. That is a law enforcement agency, and we work with all of these law enforcement agencies. And I don't know why folks do not want us to work with another federal agency.
Well, just to address the very first part, right? I think that it's absolutely a tremendous cost to the community that we're sending 12,000 people to the penitentiary, right? And that we should be doing everything we can to reduce the number of people who are criminally justice involved, who are going to prison from Travis County. And I think that that's a broad policy goal that the Democratic Party because we sent 12,000 people to the penitentiary, that justifies the separation of 5,000 families permanently, right? 5,000 Travis County families permanently. I don't think that adds up. We should be doing everything we can to keep families together, whether they're U.S. citizen families or whether they're immigrant families when they're Travis County residents.
And I think that, you know, like we're asking about as the immigrant community, right, is to sit down with us and let's talk about, you know, how we can make Austin and Travis County a safer community, right? Chief Art Acevedo sat down with the immigrant community and he had a viewpoint on secure communities, right? And he changed his viewpoint. He wrote his op-ed. He talked about how after sitting down with the immigrant community, he saw the harm that it was doing to safety, right? And I think that local law enforcement has seen that all over the United States, that instead of sitting down and talking with immigration, they'd rather sit down and talk with the immigrant community and talk about how we together, who are a part of this community, right, can make Austin and Travis County a lot safer, right? I mean, we would love to sit down with, you know, the Travis County Sheriff's Office and talk about how, hey, let's force ICE to let's hold them to the same requirements, right? Let's have them provide an arrest warrant or something, probable cause, saying you have to hold this person. Yes, we'd be willing to do that, but we have gotten no love back, right, from the sheriff, and it has been he would rather talk to immigration than talk to us.
Andrew, if you're saying that you and Mr. Libal and Amelia, we haven't had conversations several, that's disingenuous.
And I believe it's disingenuous to say when you're running for your candidacy, to say, if you prove to me that this is not mandatory, I will stop. And then to say, no, I'm going to do it again. And I believe we have you on record saying, if you prove to me that this is not mandatory, I will stop. So we can talk about disingenuous right now, but
if we have not sat down, if you're saying that we haven't met on numerous occasions, that's untrue. That is untrue.
We've met once in the last year, and you told us we are not stopping this program, even though there was already counties opting out. At that point, I believe there was 20 counties opting out. Now there's over 250 counties in the United States that have opted out of secure communities. Some of them not as progressive and liberal as Austin. So we would love to sit down and talk.
How many have stopped in the state of Texas?
So as the city of Austin and the progressive liberal county that we are, we're going to wait for Houston. We're going to wait for Houston. We're going to wait for Dallas. No, we need to be the leaders and show Texas that we are. Deportation, yes, we are, but that is not what we want to be.
I don't think we're leading deportations. If you pull the numbers,
we have the top 5 highest deportation rate in the entire United States, and top 2 in Texas.
Untrue.
Not actually a fact, but okay.
Untrue.
You just don't like Mexicans. Admit it.
Okay, so we are limited in time, and remember we want audience participation as well. So let's try to move this panel along quickly. I'm going to skip to the next question, and be respectful, please. We are on the second major question, which is how has secure communities affected the community at large? And my next question is, has there been an increase in racial discrimination by law enforcement?
We have to report our racial profiling report every year to the federal government. We have copies of it right over there in the box, and it shows that it proves that we're not racial profiling. Also, I ran the statistics the last 5 years. And the last 5 years, we've had 0 official complaints filed against the sheriff's office for racial profiling. 0.
So, one, I want to make a distinction. I think that it is really commendable that there have been 0 official complaints on racial discrimination against the county sheriff's office. But official complaints, the existence of official complaints doesn't mean, or the non-existence doesn't mean that it's not happening. You're asking a community that is over-policed and distrustful of law enforcement agency if they feel discrimination or feel like they've been a victim of discrimination to go to that same law enforcement agency and make a complaint. And I think that we all see the issues with that. Now, in terms of racial discrimination, and I'm going to talk more on a national level here, when local law enforcement agencies are given at least the power to at least participate in immigration enforcement, if there are police officers and law enforcement agents that want to enforce immigration laws or that want to arrest somebody so that they can move them through immigration proceedings, they're going to do it, and they're going to find a way to do it. In Texas, it's incredibly easy to do it because all a police officer has to do to justify pulling somebody over is give some objective reason. So the police officer can say, "Yeah, you ran a red light." The person says, "No, I didn't," and that doesn't matter because that's enough. Okay, so if a police officer wants to do it, the police officer is going to do it. And there are countless stories across the nation about people suffering these kinds of things. Major Long, I'm not saying that you guys are stopping and asking people for immigration status. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that when a deputy pulls somebody over, if that deputy wants to funnel that person through immigration, it's not hard to do it.
First of all, we have a very strong racial profiling policy against that. And we're holding anybody accountable that we caught doing that. And if you talk about the distrust that supposedly the community has, I have statistics right here that we went over today with my command staff that in fact family violence reported increased by 37% last month, and it's on the rise for the year and for the last couple of years. In fact, they're reporting to us more than ever, so that proves to me that they trust us.
Yeah, I just wanted to, this data is a little old, but at least for the period from 2008 to 2010, the number of non-criminals who had detainers issued against them nationally was about, I think it was about 25%. Right here, it was 82%, right? So that, and in Maricopa County, Sheriff Arpaio, who you may know, it was only 54%, right? So the model of what we think of as the anti-immigrant racial profiling, the poster boy for that, right? At least for that period, this department far outpaced them in that number.
So I think that this is, this issue is really hard to solve, right? Because what is it, 74% of the folks that get booked into Travis County go from APD, right? So it's really hard to say how much the sheriff and how much the APD is involved, right? I would like to say that I actually believe, and I know that at least APD does ask folks their immigration status in while they're being stopped, right? And I know that that's not, I know that that's not y'all, right? And I can say that, but I think that this program, however, allows that because APD knows, oh, if this person is undocumented and I can get that, as soon as they're booked, they're going to be deported, right? And this is where I think that we're arguing, right? That this opens up for folks to abuse their power, right? And that's what we're arguing, right? I think that having this program allows folks to abuse their power, and even if it's not the sheriff's department, even if it is APD, right? It still gives them that way of abusing their power and getting away with it because someone who's been deported is not going to file a complaint.
So you're saying APD is asking them? So you're saying that upon contact, APD is asking them their ethnicity? I'm
saying that I have at least one personal story, being myself, who got stopped by the police department and was asked, what is your immigration status? And when I refused to give it, I was told, oh, are you scared of immigration? Because don't worry, they're going to come get you if you are. And I'd also just like to point out that I'm the executive director of the Austin Immigrant Rights Coalition. That didn't mean anything to the police officer, right? So imagine if you're not the executive director of anything, what that means to the police officer.
Well, I participated the last 7 years in a row in the APD interlocal that we have where they bring all their arrestees, about 72% a year to us. I've been in those conversations every year, and I've never heard of Chief Acevedo, and I don't think he would ever condone his officers asking immigration status. In fact, I've heard him say they better not be doing it.
And I agree, but we can't, not legally, because I have no say in this, right? If I did, this would be a very different forum. Chief Acevedo does not have say in every single officer, right? And this isn't just my experience. I have heard of folks being asked their immigration status, right? Why they're, my car was actually broke down in the middle of the highway when I got asked for my immigration status. So I can imagine if someone is speeding, I can imagine if someone has a false sticker, I can imagine if someone does not have a driver's license, what it means for an officer to just be like, oh, you know what is your immigration status? It's very easy for him to ask, and it's very easy for him to be like, I arrested him because the sticker was bad or because he ran a red light. And it would never be questioned, right? So I'm saying that this program actually allows and gives the opportunity for those type of abuses.
I think that what this gets at is the saying, you can beat the rat, but you can't beat the ride, right? So the police officers have the ability to arrest you for virtually anything, right? And then what would mean for me getting out after a few hours, right, at the Travis County Jail, for somebody who is undocumented means a one-way ticket to deportation, right? So I think that what we're really looking at is that this allows for more systemic abuse for individuals to racially profile, even if the police departments in this community, APD and Travis County, have model programs.
Okay, so moving on to our third question. What can be done to ensure the safety of all residents, including immigrants seeking legalization? Should local entities, establish laws and policies that ensure the public safety of all community members, including those undocumented immigrants?
Well, one of the things I think that we definitely need to do is when we've had conversations with some immigrant rights folks, they have brought up that some individuals don't understand about the warrants if they don't pay their ticket. I've had a conversation with the Mexican consulate, and matter of fact, I've got my liaison right here, Nelda Pena, is working with them to go over to the Mexican consulate. We haven't started that yet, but she's going to go over there and talk with the individuals that are coming there for different services. And I think that as a law enforcement officer, that will help build some of these relationships. Something else that we do is that I haven't heard talked about a lot is the U visas. When when a person is a victim of a crime, if they're a part of a crime, they are eligible in many instances of trying to get a U visa to be able to stay over here. They also have a T visa for if the individuals were trafficked and they were part of a trafficking deal. And our office have been filing applications. It has increased tremendously.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I mean, the answer is yes, absolutely. And the Sheriff's Department has the choice, as we clearly established, right, to either let ICE dictate how it runs its office and enforce laws, or it can let the voters decide and let the local law enforcement agency make a determination over how to run it, right? ICE does not get to tell, you know, the Sheriff's Department here how to enforce its laws. It's up to them.
ICE touts secure communities as this public safety program, right? It's going to improve public safety and keep U.S. citizens and residents, people who have legal authority to be here, it keeps them safe. And it actually does the opposite. And this is why, because regardless of any honorable anti-discrimination policies that the law enforcement agency might have, first of all, the top can't be at every single traffic stop and at every single arrest making sure that that officer is abiding by that policy, number one. Number two, even if every single officer is abiding by that policy, participation in secure communities means the following. It means that when an immigrant community member sees a uniform, they see immigration, and they're right. And the reason is that law enforcement agencies have become the gateway to deportation because of secure communities and ICE detainers. It's true, it's how it happens. You're undocumented, you get booked, ICE has your fingerprints, they come and pick you up, and you're out, right? So a uniform means immigration for the immigrant community. And so what that's doing is driving a wedge between law enforcement agencies and the people that they are supposed to protect. It is causing victims and witnesses of crime to not come forward, to not report crimes, and it's allowing crime to thrive in immigrant community neighborhoods.
Yes, Ash, local entities should be able to decide, right? Why is it that the federal program that is ICE, right? Why is it that law enforcement gets to decide what our sheriff wants to do, right? Like, we think that yes, and this is again going back to we would love to sit down and figure out how we can resolve this, right? There's been over 250 counties, 250 places in the United States have decided, you know what? No, this does not work for us. So why is it that Travis County is behind some very conservative counties in the United States? Why is it that we're not just deciding what our policy should be and how we're going to treat our community members, right? And I think that that's what this campaign is about. We want to decide what our policies are going to be and how we should treat our own immigrant community, right? And how we make it a safer community.
He keeps talking about the 254 counties who have opted out. I don't know what the number is, but there's over 3,000 sheriff's offices across the country. So just because these individuals are doing that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. And I think that one of the things that we need to do is to consistently have dialogue. Matter of fact, I'm working with Senator Barrientos and some attorneys to look at ways that we can address this issue. And we're going to have conversations. We're always trying to do better, but when we sit down together, we just can't come to an agreement. But we are always talking about this, and I can tell you, and my staff can tell you, that out of all the things that we do over at the Sheriff's Office, that the last 6 years, this has been at the forefront that we deal with every day.
And surprisingly enough, the deportations keep happening. Maybe because no one is at the table who's actually directly affected by this situation, right? And I think that we can all agree that if we want to make a solution to something that's directly affecting one community, we want to make sure that that community is there, right? This is becoming, never mind. Scratch that, now the metaphor that I was going to give y'all. But those 250 counties that have actually opted out are showing that this is the progressive thing to do. I mean, entire states have opted out of this program. And courts have shown, and I'll let the attorneys do this, courts have shown that this is actually a constitutional program, and that we do need to opt out because this is the right thing to do.
I just want to make sure everybody understands and clarify something. We honor an ICE detainer, in most cases less than 24 hours, and they don't remove them right from our facility. They take them down to San Antonio to the immigration court where they get their due process. Just like we hold everybody else for another jurisdiction for their due process to go to court and be held accountable by that particular court, not by the sheriff's office.
Okay, let me talk about due process a little bit. First of all, due process in immigration court is a joke. For anybody who's that's number one. Number two, and litigation is sort of percolating across the nation. There are relatively new claims that are being brought up, and so it's taking a while to come down the pipeline. But there have been several federal district court decisions saying that this program, or compliance with ICE detainers, is unconstitutional. And in fact, the Supreme Court, when it knocked down the anti-immigrant Arizona laws, said that a local law enforcement agency making an arrest based solely on immigration violations would be unconstitutional. That's a Supreme Court violation. Now, here's what's happening. When a local law enforcement agency holds somebody a minute over the time that they would otherwise be held, over the time that a U.S. citizen would walk free out the doors, that's a new arrest. That's a new seizure. And you need probable cause for that. And if you don't have it, you are violating people's Fourth Amendment and 14th Amendment rights. A federal district court in Oregon most recently said flat out, I don't care how long you're holding them, any amount of time is a Fourth Amendment violation. It's unconstitutional. The county was on the hook for that. And the response by a wave of sheriffs in 3 states in the area was, we're going to stop doing this. We don't want to be in the business of violating people's constitutional rights because we're here to uphold the law, not break it.
I just wanted to address what Major Long said about where people go once they're apprehended once Travis County turns them over to ICE, right? They don't go directly to immigration court, right? They go to an immigration detention center. Usually they're managed with the Pearsall Detention Center, which is a giant, I don't know if people have been there, right? But it's a giant, sprawling, privately operated prison in Pearsall, Texas. And this is one of many immigration detention centers, and my organization and many other people in the room go into these immigration detention centers on a regular basis. And these are facilities where abuse is rampant, where private corporations are making billions of dollars detaining people, and this is the entity, right? Immigration and Customs Enforcement, this is the entity that we as a county are partnering with. And we're turning over 19 people a week into this real gulag of immigration detention facilities around the country. And I think that we have a responsibility, right, to the people who are coming out of our jail, the Travis County Jail, to not be partnering with an agency like Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and instead be partnering with the immigrant community to figure out a better policy for all of Travis County.
So before we finish our last question, I want to go ahead and let the audience start lining up behind this microphone along the wall here. So if you have any questions, please line up right behind this microphone along the wall. To the right. My right, your left. So I'll just say left side. Okay, to finish off this panel discussion, my last question is, what can local policymakers, law enforcement, advocacy groups, and the community at large do to enforce better policy and comprehensive reform? The question again is, what can local policymakers, law enforcement, advocacy groups, and community at large, so basically a large partnership among all these entities, do to enforce better policy comprehensive reform?
Again, I think it's sitting at the table, talking, and agreeing not to disagree.
Vote. We are, the state of voting in Texas is a bit in flux, but it's clear that the local law enforcement agency here has made a decision about what it thinks is best for the community, and if you disagree with it, if you don't think that local law enforcement agencies should let ICE tell you how to run your community and what's best for your community, then vote.
So I think it's pretty clear now that DC is failing us on comprehensive immigration reform. So we need to look at home here in our very county and minimize the harm that's being done to our immigrant community here. And the best thing that we can do is to stop cooperation with ICE. The sheriff has said, sit down at the table and talk. He's right that we did meet one time. Bob, Alejandro, and I met, and a few other people. There are immigrant community members who would love to sit down with you and tell you their story. And we really want to come to some sort of solution here, some sort of a compromise. It does nothing, it helps nothing and no one to have you on one side of the room and us on the other side of the room. We really want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I agree, right? And I think that, you know, to just tell you something, right? Like so some of us, you know, some of us can't vote, right? Including myself. And even though we can't, right? I do think that our voices needs to be heard, right? I think that sitting down, talking with the sheriff is a great idea. I would love that, right? And I think that in a broader, right, solution is that the elected officials, not only the sheriff, right, but also our county commissioners, also our city council members, need to actually sit down with community members and actually listen to what the community wants, and not what the federal agency wants, not what someone from DC wants, but what our community members want and what's best for our community members.
Yeah, I think Alejandro and Amelia are right, and I think it's fairly simple to stop honoring ICE detainers, right? It's a fairly simple policy, and it's something that communities around the country have done. I also don't think it's all that controversial here in Travis County. It's something that the City Council voted 7-0 in support of. It's something the Travis County Democratic Party has supported. It's something that all of the Democratic candidates who are running for county commission and county judge and many of the current county commissioners support. Right? It's something that the Latino community, right, the immigrant rights community has brought up, the Network of Asian American Organizations, Chief Acevedo, right? The list goes on, right? This is something that people have spoken about, and this is something that I think needs to change, and I don't actually think it's that difficult. I think that we have models around the country to do it, and so I really hope that after this we sit down and figure out how is Travis County going to stop honoring ICE detainers once and for all.
ICE is not running Travis County Jail. We do honor ICE detainers, and we work closely with ICE, just like we work closely with all the rest of the law enforcement agencies. And we will continue to work in partnership with all of the law enforcement agencies.
Another thing I want to say, I just want to clarify, even in meetings, and prior to you getting your position where we've been meeting for 7 years with different groups. And I want to clarify the way y'all paint some of these individuals that we honor an ICE detainer. I can show you a daily list of people with aggravated sexual assault of a child, murder, aggravated assault, family violence. You can't just say they're all just Class C traffic violations, because that's just not true.
No, you're right. They're not all Class C traffic violations, but we have a criminal justice system for a reason, right? It's to deal with people who are accused of crimes, and there are safeguards in the criminal justice system. And what the county's own data says is that 74% of people last year who had an ICE detainer put on them and were subsequently deported were only accused of misdemeanors. So you trot out like the most serious crime. And the Syracuse data, right, says that only 3% were accused of level 1 offenses, what immigration considers level 1 offenses. And level 1 offenses can include re-entry after being deported, right? And the county's own data says the vast majority of people who have ICE detainers put on them are only accused of misdemeanors, and that makes sense because the vast majority of people booked into the jail, period, are people who are only accused of misdemeanors. So to sort of conflate that the immigrant community is somehow more likely to be violent or sexual predators or whatever than anyone else I frankly think that's really offensive.
No, and all those misdemeanors are DWIs, assault, family violence, Class A's, and a lot of other misdemeanors that you say doesn't really matter. Well, I believe it matters to the citizens of Austin, Travis County that some of those crimes are important to them, especially like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and the other advocacy groups against crimes like that.
Really quickly, I want to make a distinction that secure communities and ICE detainers, in the way that we're talking, they operate pre-trial, not post-conviction. So you're talking about people who are brought in to the jail and are handed over to ICE before they're convicted of whatever it is that they're charged of. And again, we know that minority communities are over-policed. We also know that our criminal justice system is broken and that people take plea deals a lot of times when they're not guilty. And so a conviction doesn't necessarily mean that this person is going to go out and commit a bunch of crimes. Also, not honoring ICE detainers doesn't mean that you're letting people run rampant in the community, right, to go and commit more crimes. Because the criminal justice system has procedural safeguards in place to make sure that that doesn't happen in the form of bond, where a judge weighs the public safety risks, right, with whether the person should be let out.
All right, thank you everybody. Once again, my name is Vincent Harding. I'm the Secretary of the Travis County Democratic Party. We want to thank you so much for being here tonight. Before we go to the questions, we do want to ask you to make sure that your comments remain respectful. I do want to recognize a couple of folks as well. We have County Judge Sam Bisco in the audience with us. And we have Democratic nominee for County Commissioner Precinct 2, Bridget Shea. And with that, we'll have our first question, 1 minute each.
Hey, do we have a time limit on this? 1 minute. Yeah, my name is Chris Forsby. I'm the precinct chair for the TCDP and a owner of Clearbird Interpreting. I provide interpreting services through a bunch of associates from all over the world in 85 different languages down the courthouse. And I want to say that Sheriff Hamilton and his deputies, I've always seen them treat people impartially and courteously, regardless of their ethnicity or even their status. I mean, the DA. Okay. Y también quiero decir que bienvenidos a todos, con documentos o no con documentos. Ustedes son miembros de nuestra comunidad. And that means, hey, welcome to everybody. Whether you have documents or not, you're members of our community. So what I have to say here is that we're coming together and work to solve some problems in our community. We're experiencing abuse of both documented and undocumented immigrant rights, their legal rights, and disregard and disrespect of our community's value of our immigrant neighbors, workers, and business owners. 1 minute. We are all affected by these problems. From my experience, I have trust in the Sheriff's Office to treat people with respect and dignity. The problem is not law enforcement. It's not immigrants.
I'm so sorry, but your time has up. You've already spent a minute. You're going on 2 minutes now. So if you can just ask the question directly, please.
Sure. What can we do to put the onus on the people that are making decisions about deportation to reflect our community values by providing our community with the same level of information that ICE gets to decide who we want in our community and who does need to go? Because some of the people that are arrested for DWI, which kills people, domestic violence, which is brutal, and you can't have that, do need to be deported.
What was the question again?
What can we do to put the onus of deciding who is deporting people on ICE and make them reflect our community values about who should be deported and who should not? So let our decision, our courts, like Leslie Boykin, a local criminal defense attorney is here and defends immigrants, let those people and our judges have input on that and not just have ICE grab it when they get someone's fingerprints.
I think the issue is immigration reform. I think that definitely needs to be addressed because ICE is the only entity that can deport you. So those individuals are making the decisions, and they have a list of priorities that they are going by now. And if the priorities aren't correct, I think that individuals need to lobby Congress.
Yes, immigration is broken. Immigration, ICE is a broken agency, and we continue to comply with it. That's a problem on us, because actually, to answer the question, we need to decide, how the community gets treated, right? And that's, again, what we're asking for right now. If we continue to comply with immigration, just deporting, separating our community members, then we're continuing to comply with a broken system that isn't working anymore. So why do we continue to do it?
Sure, my name is Paul Quincy. I'm a
Put
Travis
the
County.
microphone closer to you.
I'm sorry. Okay. My name is Paul Quincy. I'm a Travis County Democrat, and I want to give you an opportunity to walk back, or hopefully completely disavow something you said earlier that I feel like probably offended a lot of people in this room. It offended me, and I haven't lived anywhere near to the kind of experiences that we've been talking about tonight. When you said that you have as much advocacy for the families that have been separated and in some cases destroyed by this policy, and said you have the same advocacy for thousands of convicted felons sent to the penitentiary every year. As a Democrat, I want to give you an opportunity to walk that back, sir, because, respectfully, if that's really the way you feel, I feel like you're running for the wrong office in the wrong county in the wrong party.
Well, I think you misheard what I said. I said for the families. I have empathy for the families. This was empathy for the families, not apathy. I said I have empathy for the families, and I'll stick to that.
But so are you? Okay, so I must have misheard you.
You did.
Okay, well, well, in that case, do you really have the same empathy?
What did I just say? I do.
Okay, I apologize.
No.
Chair, I misunderstood.
Hi, good evening. My name is Montserrat Garibay. I am a pre-K teacher, and I also represent teachers across the Austin ISD district. It is heartbreaking to see our students being taken to foster care because their parents are being deported. Do you believe these students, who most of the students are U.S. citizens, deserve to have their parents taken away from them? Also, I am a voter here in Austin, and I want to make sure that we hold our elected officials accountable. We demand ESCOM to be stopped in Austin.
We're very involved, the Travis County Sheriff's Office, and so am I, and so are my command staff. We are part of the Singh group, and that's where individuals have parents that are incarcerated. And this is our second year doing that. As a matter of fact, my mentee father was locked down in jail, and he's an illegal immigrant. And one of the things that the little boy talks about all the time is about his father. And his father is back home now, waiting on a hearing. But one of the things the little boy kept telling me is that he don't want his father to continue to beat up his mom. So that's one of the issues that I have. They've been in jail. He's going back and forth to jail all the time because of family violence. This is his third time, but he's waiting on a hearing. So I have concerns with that too. I don't think the little boy needs to be in a home like that.
I think that's one isolated issue. As a teacher, I see many students who are heartbroken.
There are a bunch of people lined up and speak right there. She just asked a question.
Let her ask a question.
That was not 10 minutes.
Chris, You have a response? You're good. All right, next person.
Sheriff Hamilton, nothing is going to change my personal beliefs about why you continue with the Secure Communities program. The crowd knows it. You now know it. But I have a personal appeal for you, sir. Until a couple of weeks ago, I thought you were just one stone, cold-hearted individual. And then I saw you on TV at the funeral services of your young deputy who should never die, have this community taken action to secure the roads for all people, law enforcement people who are most at risk, in my opinion. And when I saw your heart go out, I realized right at that moment that you look after your people like they're your own personal family. And what I'm asking you here tonight is to search your heart about who you serve. These communities that you were deported. And I have clients who have told me your officers run them down and ask them for no good reason what their immigration status is. And I can get you names, I'll be happy to do that afterwards. But I would like you to look at the people that you serve as your family, like you do the people who work for you, and know that they're not going to report crimes. Chief Acevedo has told us that's why they reversed their policy, because people won't report crimes. You have these people in your county that are targets of crime because of your policy. And again, I'm asking you to search your heart and do a 180 on this. We don't have time to vote you out of office. We don't have time to ask County Judge Briscoe to kick you out of office. You can do this, sir. It's in your hands. From everything I've heard, it's up to you. So put my personal beliefs aside, search your heart, and do the right things.
You said your beliefs changed. I'm not that cold-hearted person, right? Did you say that?
Well, once I saw you on TV over your deputy, my heart went out to you for how you look out after your people. I'm asking you to do that same thing for the people you serve.
Yes.
They are targets right now.
And you can get those names because every time we've had some, as Major Long said, that we've talked to numerous folks over the last 7 years, and every time they bring up their client told them this, and we asked them to give us a name, and nobody in 7 years have given us a name. So if you could write those down.
I've got your email address.
Gotcha. Was that you that sent me that email?
That was.
Bless your heart. Bless you. Bless you. Bless you.
I'm Kenneth Cohen, psychotherapist, mediator, and I've been a neighbor to 3 right down the street to 3 undocumented people. One that has the best home on the street. A second that, well, let me leave all of that aside. Sheriff Hamilton, if you knew that we were a part of a process right now of helping the FBI collect 130 pages on you like Arpaio had on him, Arpaio had a special favor for the FBI that asked him to sit down. Do we need to do that? I'm an organizer. If we need to do that, I'm of the position that we will. The question is not will you, but will you ask the people of this county to get you out of a difficult spot? Will you?
Will you rephrase that question?
Okay. We have a problem. This group is here because we have a problem. Do you want us to go to the length that Maricopa County went to, the people of Maricopa County, with they ended up with a Sheriff Arpaio, 3 lawsuit. One for $20 million. Do we need to do that?
It's really for everybody.
Does anyone want to answer that question? I think Cool's question was, do we need to go to the same extent as other counties across the country that opted out of the program? And
No, we want to sit down with the sheriff, right? I mean, I don't know that we want to sit down with the sheriff. I mean, I promise you that if the sheriff decides to opt out, we would throw a massive party for him. Like, that is true. We would love to sit down and find a solution to this. We do not want to take it to where, you know, the folks in Maricopa County took us at Ohio, because we know that Sheriff Hamilton is not our Ohio. We know that. But we would love to sit down with him. We do not want to take it to that extreme, right?
Thank you for saying that. I'm definitely
David Knight at Full Words. I have a question about, I guess, what happens to people who are accused of violent crime. Do they typically get a trial and serve time, or are they typically deported? And if they're deported, what's to keep them from just walking across the border again?
Real quick, can everyone hear the questions? So for people that are asking questions, make sure that the microphone is directly in front of your mouth.
Okay, can we do it again? Okay. I have a question. If someone is accused of a violent crime, do they typically get a trial? Do they go to jail? Or is the solution typically to deport them if they're an illegal alien? If they're deported, what's to keep them from just returning and committing another crime?
A magistrate will usually decide when they go to court and when they're released. Not a law enforcement agency. That's up to a magistrate, and then that process of them signing a bond if they want to or choose to, if a bond's available, but it's up to a magistrate to decide who stays in jail for how long.
Do you have any statistics as to how many are stand trial and how many are just deported?
As far as deporting, we do not know who gets deported. Normally, the individual will complete their sentence, especially on a heinous crime such as that. They will complete their sentence, and then they will be deported or go through the hearing from the prison system. They will be pulled up there and gone to whatever the local detainment center is. And then at that particular time, they will decide whether they will be deported or they're able to stay here.
Which I think speaks to the unnecessary nature of this program in particular, because whether I like it or not, right, if you go to prison in Texas, immigration is in prison, and you will be screened in the prison system. So what we're really talking about the 5,000 people who've been deported in Travis County, are people who didn't go to prison, right? And they were people who were adjudicated in some other way, right? Whether they would have been bonded out or they wouldn't have gone to prison in the first place. So the people who are deported that we're talking about, the 19 immigrants a week since the program started in Travis County, are people who didn't go to prison.
Hello, I'm Sylvia Solieta. You might kind of know my last name from my mom.
Speak a little louder.
You might know my name kind of because of my mom being an activist, especially from my dad's deportation trials and stuff like that. But what I wanted to ask, why was it so important to get information about my father, as the leaks of the email showed? Because I felt like it was humiliating my family. And I know you maybe not trying to make it seem that way, but it did. And as well as, what do you think about the children that it affects every single day? Every single day someone gets arrested. Every single day it is arrested over a small crime and hold detainers against them, not being able to go to their families and not knowing where their fathers are. Do you ever think about the children, especially?
Again, if you said something, I might know you. How would I know you and something about your father?
My mom is Carmen Zulieta, which she is a very big activist, and her name is very well known throughout, especially this particular law, ESCOM, or whatever it is. She's been talking about against it for so long, and that even in the emails, it said, can I have the information of the month?
Oh, gotcha. There was an article that came out. That talked about, I guess your father had got deported and there was no charge, that he had no charges. And I contacted ICE to find out, because that's the only way that I can find out what he did to be deported. And I contacted them to get information. And I do it anytime there's something in the newspaper about somebody that had an ICE detainer on them. I contact ICE to find out what the charge was. So that's how that came about. What was your other question?
With the SCOM, and especially, do you ever think about the children that are getting affected? Because it's not just me, it's tons of other children. I have tons of friends who have been in the same situation as I have, and we're in a small school, and their families are in process of getting deported because of SCOM.
I do. Again, as I said earlier, I'm empathetic with the families.
Then why do you continue?
Because
I heard that this specific law isn't really a law. It is actually something that is voluntarily done. It's not necessarily you have to do this. You have to. It's not actually saying you have to do this or you're in trouble. It doesn't. It's a voluntary.
You're correct.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. My name is Hannah Alexander. I am a law student at UT. And my question is, well, first, U-visas do help victims of crime. It's a really great program. But they only help victims of the most serious crimes, like abduction. Fortunately, these crimes aren't the most common, but they are the most serious. So I think everyone has agreed that we need to help victims of crime. I remember the major said that DWI is a big crime and it's very important. But immigrants who do not feel comfortable talking to the police wouldn't even be able to get a U visa if they were a victim of a DWI or burglary or a lot of other crimes. So I was wondering, what percentage of the crimes committed in Travis County are U visa eligible? And also, what can we do to help victims of crimes? Obviously, we can't change that federal visa law, like the way we can choose or not choose to comply with the ICE detainer program.
I couldn't answer as far as the percentage is concerned, but one of the things that we have taken the lead here in Central Texas with putting on training classes for law enforcement, not only here but around San Antonio, bringing in folks to learn the system on the U visa and the T visa. But as far as the percentages, I couldn't respond to that.
Is there another way the county could help victims of crimes that are not eligible for U visas? I mean, this is kind of, I don't know if any of the other panelists have ideas. This is where I'm like, let's be creative and solve the problem.
Yeah, let's do that, right? I think we should first start off with ending secure communities because it makes it more, like, folks are not scared to call the cops, and this is something from what we hear, right? Because we are a membership organization, that victims are scared to call the cops because domestic violence, as you know, works in very different ways, right? It isn't just about physical abuse, but it's also mental abuse. It's a lot of different abuses that folks are too scared to call the cops because they're scared that that person is going to get deported. That person is the only breadwinner. What are they going to do? And we need to eliminate that, right? We need to eliminate the fear of like getting deported. Not only the person who's committing the abuse, but also the person who is calling the cops. Because there has been situations where people have called the cops and they have gotten picked up and they have gotten deported. So we think it starts off with ending SCOM. That is the first step, and then after that, we can work with law enforcement to figure out how we can solve this issue.
The last couple of people have mentioned this issue of whether or not it's required. And I don't know if they specifically asked that question, but I'll ask it to you, Sheriff. Do you believe you are required to comply with the detainee request?
Well, I tell you what, I'm pretty confused on that, simply because just recently, I I think 2010, they changed the paper. They changed it 2010, 2012. They changed the detainer language on there, and they put that ICE detainer is a request. And then you have the Third Circuit and you have the Ninth, right?
No, the Ninth has against the Third Circuit and 2 federal district courts.
You have 2 federal appeals court that have said that it is a request, that the federal government cannot commandeer you. But we are governed by the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit has not come up with a ruling on that.
The Fifth Circuit does not need to come up with a ruling on that because DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, which is the umbrella agency for ICE, actually came out in a letter and flat out said compliance with ICE detainers is voluntary. And the form itself, as Sheriff Hamilton said, says request.
And there's federal district courts out there, federal district courts that have said that the law reads that it is that you shall, and they are ruling that it was mandatory. There are federal courts out there.
Sheriff Hamilton, I would love to see those decisions.
I'm glad you asked. I got it right here.
I have a 92-page amicus brief. I'll share it with you too.
Go ahead.
While we're waiting on the sheriff to bring out that case, we'll go to the next question.
Good evening. My name is Leslie Boykin. I am a local criminal defense attorney. And before I say anything, I would like to say that your deputies that work in transportation and security at the courthouse are some of the finest law enforcement officers I've ever worked around or known. And I've been around law enforcement my whole life. So I appreciate them very much. That being said, as a criminal defense attorney, I know I'm not necessarily the median or the average or whatever, but I'm just telling you my experience in the past 10 years. I have never, not even once, had a criminal defendant that did not make an ICE bond. That being said, when I get them the personal bond, they get the hold release in Travis County, they go to Pearsall, their family pays $5,000 to $10,000 minimum cash to get them an ICE bond. Then they come back and they're out, or they have another charge, they go get that hold release or whatever, but the end all be all is that they're back out at their job, working and supporting their family and fighting their case or defending it or mitigating it, whatever the case may be. So I would like for you to explain to me how SCOM changes anything other than putting money in the pockets of Travis County and the federal ICE agency. Because it seems like we get bonds here, we get bonds there, we're still back facing the case no matter what. What's the necessary deal to go over to Pearsall and get this $10,000 bond, which sets them back, frankly, from paying me or from paying a lot of other things that they need to do to get their case resolved?
First of all, I appreciate your comments about all the fine work that our staff does in the courts, on the streets, in the jails. They're the finest men and women I've ever been around. And they're dedicated to service, and they do their job very well every day. As far as the bond process, the registration process, and how that works, I would think it's fair if you get with the judges and pretrial and those folks regarding their processes.
I'm sorry, I would say that you probably have some statistics as to who gets out on bond and who gets, transported to Pearsall, and then, they all come back eventually.
Okay, we don't dedicate our staff, our jail staff, to doing any type of statistical, keeping up with ICE, what they do after they come and pick them up from us. You're going to get those statistics from them. And where they transport them, what happens to them in court. We don't spend 1 man-hour on worrying about what they're doing and keeping up with their statistics. You'll have to ask them.
Thank you. My name is Virginia Raymond, Sheriff Hamilton, and Major Long. We've met several times before. I was a 7-year literacy volunteer at the jail in Del Valley. We met the first time on this issue at the Commissioner's Court way back when, and we had a little talk that we talked about and got over, and then I came with the Jewish Community Relations Council to meet with you all. And then Major Long, you also gave one of the most beautiful and moving oral history movies I've ever heard about the tragedy of the loss of one of your officer colleagues. I will always appreciate you for that. I'm here today in a different context. I'm here as a heartbroken lawyer for immigrants and refugees, and particularly who is on my mind today is a young man who comes from the murder capital of the world, Satinder, and who was locked up from June of 2013 until February of 2014 on a charge, criminal charge in the Travis County Jail, which was dismissed in February, even though witnesses had come forward much earlier to say it never happened, and finally the county and district attorney dismissed it in February. But that man had an ICE hold on him the entire time. And because he was in Travis County Jail and not able to be released on bond, his 3 U.S. citizen children were never able to see him. And that is because their mom did not have a driver's license, separated from the dad, but he was a very involved parent who had lived in the same apartment complex with the mom so that they could share child care and bring the kids home from school. She didn't have a driver's license, so the kids were never able to visit their dad because of the processes at the jail for visiting. And we tried many times through Securus and never, ever, ever were able to make it work from any site. So the kids were never able to see their dad, and then he was, because of the ICE hold, put into deportation proceedings and is now living in the murder capital of the world. I want to ask you, Sheriff Hamilton, this is mostly yours, is how can we justify ICE holds and then facilitating the deportation or removal, technically, of people who have been charged with crimes but who have never been convicted of any crimes in Travis County or anywhere else, and who have families and long years here in Travis County that were entirely peaceful. As we know, not everybody who's charged with a crime is guilty. Thank you.
Again, if you can restate that question but shorten it.
How can we justify facilitating the deportation of people who have been charged with crimes but who have never been convicted of anything by virtue? How can we justify facilitation by virtue of the ICE hold that gets them into the deportation process? Thank you.
Well, number one, I don't know what that individual's history was. That individual could have been deported before, or ordered to leave the country by a judge. I've heard those are instances where an individual, for instance, we had an individual that was arrested in Fort Worth or Arlington. He got arrested up there. We had a warrant for his arrest here in Travis County for prostitution. The individual charges were dropped here. But we didn't know because ICE has all this information. There was an Interpol warrant for murder in Mexico for that individual, and we released him. We released that individual, but within 2 days they caught him back in Arlington. So we were fortunate to catch those individuals. So I guess the answer to the question is I don't know what that individual had on their background. I would hope that if they're going to deport him or her, that they had some type of something.
You don't, in order to be deported, you don't have to have any sort of criminal history if you're here in the country without authorization. That's plenty of reason. And relief is really, really minimal, and it's really, really hard to win in immigration court.
That sounds like the courts need to change those.
Well, or it sounds like you should stop facilitating that program.
My name is Doris Williams, and I am precinct chair with the Caceres County Democratic Party. I do have a question, but before I get to my question, I would just like to preface it by saying I think that Sheriff Hamilton is trying to do this job the best that he can under these circumstances. I think that there's people on both sides that, well, it's subjective and he doesn't have to do it, and there are people that believe, well, he's following the letter of the law. So I think you're doing the best job that you can, and I want to say that to you personally. I think that we've drug you out here. Now we have you over here at this center. We've had you at the county, and we've had you at various settings over this issue. Now here's my question to the panel. My question to the panel is, do you have any statistics on the other immigrants, the other immigrant communities in Austin? Because if you just look at this, it looks one-sided. It just looks like it's just the immigrants are all coming from Mexico or Latin America, and there are no other immigrants. So if anyone could answer that for me, I'd like to know, do you have any statistics or want to speak to the other immigrant communities?
Sheriff Hamilton, are you looking for statistics? Are you looking for statistics? Okay. I don't have statistics. I mean, I do know that, for instance, when the City Council passed a resolution against this program, some of the very prominent supporters of this were people from the Asian American and the Asian immigrant community. The network of Asian American organizations has been very strong on this. I also know that in the audience there are some young immigrants from places other than Latin America that I'm sure would be happy to talk to you afterwards. Or Annie, if you that's probably also, but I don't know the statistics.
I also don't know the statistics, right? And I don't know what, like, the statistics on what, I'm sorry, like on the deportation or
People that have stories where they've been separated from their families and sent back to Africa. Sent back to Did you understand what I was saying? You know, like people from Africa, or people from the islands that are immigrants also that have been separated from their families and deported, and because it just seems to just be we're focusing on just certain groups, and there are other immigrants too that have stories. I'm sure. And I'm asking if this family can speak to those issues, and also I'm asking if the party is reaching out to those communities as much as they're already reaching out to other immigrants.
I'd like to comment that as many folks, there's other supporters of the Tri-State Sheriff's Office what we're doing. In fact, I want us to do even more. I don't know if you've heard of the 460 and all these other things that other people are doing to do more to enforce the laws or ask immigration status, and we don't do that. We do the bare minimum, and we're trying to work with the law, what we believe the law, another law enforcement agency. And we have a lot of people that, even after these type of forums, come support what we're doing and wish we could even do more.
And
I've got here from January 1st, 2012 till June 30, 2014, approximately 136,500 bookings have been entered into our system. 5,753 bookings have had ICE detainers placed on them, about 4%. 4,571 of the detainers were released to ICE. 1% of the bookings are entered as Asian, based on place of birth. It's either Asian, a Pacific Islander, American Indian, Alaskan, or unknown, not of Hispanic origin. That's 1%. 23% of the bookings are entered as race as black, not of Hispanic origin. 42% of bookings are entered as white, not of Hispanic origin. 34% of bookings are entered as Asian, American Indian, unknown, white, and ethnicity Hispanic. So, And 0.5% of ICE detainers, which was 30 during that period of time, were on individuals with a race of Asian or American Indian or unknown. 0.6% ICE detainers were placed on individuals with a race of black. 3.9 ICE detainers placed were individuals with white, not Hispanic, and 95% of the ICE detainers were on individuals with the Asian, Indian, unknown, black, white, and ethnicity of Hispanic.
And if I can just answer on that a little bit, I know that I don't have to disagree. Thank you for sharing that, Sheriff. But I think that we do know that, like as Amelia said earlier, is that our communities are over-policed, right? So I think that if there is, if there was a bigger population of African immigrants here in Austin, you would see that they would be pulled over and that they would be processed through secure communities, right? I don't think that we have to, that it's a debate that communities of color are over-policed by the police, right? And the fact is that they are policed and they are booked, they will be put into process of secure communities, right? And there is, we've met with the South Asian American Leading Together Circle, right? Which is predominantly Asian immigrants, and they have the personal stories of dealing with the police. So I'll just say, right, the fact is that since our communities are already over-policed, we know that this is going to be another obstacle for folks to jump when they get into the booking center.
And we also had individuals that are arrested in our jail from 117 countries.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Susana Almanza, and I also want to give thanks for all those who work on immigrant rights issues and human rights issues. Les quiero dar las gracias a esos que trabajan con los inmigrantes, los derechos de los inmigrantes y también los derechos humanos, because that's very important. As I see this, the ultimate court is the human rights court, because this is definitely a human rights violation of what is happening and has been happening. And I think we all are very much aware of the history of how a lot of the African American people were separated from their families and how they were deported to the United States of America and all over, and how they were separated from their families. So we as Latinos and as humans understand when families are separated, how painful that is. But my question to you, Sheriff Hamilton, you said that you're willing to meet with groups and stuff. The Raza Roundtable has reached out to you, has called your office, has requested a meeting with the Raza Roundtable, and we have not gotten a response, and you have not come to the Raza Roundtable. We meet every Saturday at 10 o'clock a.m. at Machita's Restaurant on the 11th and IH35.
I'm aware of your invite, but my schedule gets full too on Saturdays. I have things at my church, and I have things to go to also. And I told my assistant to let whoever she's talking to that we're going to try to make a schedule to get over there. So it's not like I'm dodging.
Yeah, but it's just like you have a calendar. I don't care if you say next month or 2 months, if we're waiting to at least say, here's the date I can make it, or it's later, we will change our schedule in order to have that. We are willing to have that conversation with you.
But we need you to look at your calendar. I'm a very busy person myself. And so I have a calendar, believe me, people know that. I'm all over the community and issues. But I also try and make time for people, whether it's this month, next month, or the third month. And all I ask is you look at your busy calendar and see if you can squeeze the community that's most impacted into that calendar.
Month and a half. Am I correct?
This particular invite, but you've been asked by the immigrant rights. Let's have that talk. Let's have that discussion. So that's just another added group who's asking for that invite also.
Gotcha.
I see we have 7 people left. If you can please limit your questions to 30 seconds or less, and we can hopefully get through this. So I'm sorry if you're not in line, based upon respect for our moderators, we're not going to be able to get to you tonight.
Good evening, panel. Thank you for coming out to East Austin. My name is Alejandro, and
I'm the LULAC
Can you put the microphone closer to you?
I'm the LULAC District 12 Director, and I'm coordinator with Concilio, which is a coalition of Mexican American neighborhood associations. And I'm a native Austinite. This is part of my stomping grounds, where I grew up. I want to thank the panel for bringing this issue and discussing this issue as well. This is a national issue, immigration reform. I do want to say that Sheriff Hamilton has met with LULAC District 12, the Concilio representative, and members of the Mexican community. Ruiz was member of La Red. James Kerr, who at that time, before your time, was meeting with Sheriff Hamilton. James Kerr. Also, the sheriff has always sat down and discussed and entertained the issues that we are discussing today. The issue is, if an individual chooses to break the law, this is a question that I've had all the time. How can that responsibility of the sheriff or Acevedo be that they are the ones that are separating the families? Because when that individual chooses to break the law, then that individual themselves put themselves in that risk.
Please be respectful. I know that we're all going to have feelings.
We were brought Mexicanas from Acapulco that live here in Austin and asked LULAC, we have problems with domestic violence. Our wives are beating, our women are getting beat up, and we want to be able to feel secure and safe that when we report them, that due process will be done. And this is an issue that the sheriff has been working on. My question is that this is a national issue. Is it not? Thank you.
So that can happen, but it's a local issue that we want to talk about. Okay, you're not there.
Tengo dos preguntas solamente. I only have two questions. Si su trabajo, perdón, Sheriff, no sé si me escucha.
Excuse me, Sheriff, I'm not sure if you're paying attention to me.
Mi nombre es Carmen Rodríguez de Subieta y esto le dirá quién soy.
My name is Carmen Rodríguez de Subieta, and this will tell you who I am.
Y después de lo que sucedió con mi esposo me volví una activista y me voy a quedar como activista hasta que esto no termine.
After what happened to my husband, I became an activist, and I will remain an activist until this ends.
Esto ha sido muy doloroso para nosotros, pero yo tengo una pregunta para usted. ¿Cómo usted siente la historia de sus antepasados?
This has been a really painful experience for us, and I have a question for you. How do you think about what your ancestors went through?
Ok, ahora usted está haciendo lo mismo con nosotros y queremos unión, no separación entre afroamericanos y hispanos.
Now you're doing the same thing to us, and what we want is unity between black and brown people.
Thank you so much for making this forum. My name is Amelia back from Taylor, and I'm an attorney. And I wanted to share and get your opinion on two clients that I spoke with recently. Both of them are undocumented. One of them was pulled over at a traffic stop. She got a ticket. She was terrified. She didn't pay it. She got a warrant for her arrest. She was terrified. She has 3 kids. Should she go in, pay her ticket, $1,000, which benefits obviously the taxpayers, and risk being deported in order to do this? The second one is a gentleman, also undocumented, also the father of 4 children, whose house was the house in which a crime was committed, a very serious crime, and he was also terrified to go talk to law enforcement for fear of being deported. And these are just 2 examples of so many countless other undocumented individuals that live in our community that basically are caught between their responsibility as citizens or as residents here, their civic responsibility to protect the safety and welfare of everyone else around them, And also their responsibilities to pay taxes, to basically participate in our society, and their terrible fear of being deported and risking everything, the lives of their children, all of their savings and things they have. So, Chair Clinton, what options do these people have?
What options they have? I don't have an answer to that.
So they're caught between the situation is their responsibility to their kids to stay here, protect them, take care of them, and also the other responsibilities that they have. So laws like ESCOM, programs like ESCOM make it impossible for people to comply with their civic responsibilities to be witnesses to crime. I mean, the gentleman that came to me really, I don't know what he ended up doing. Did he go tell the police about the crime that he had information for that would have led to the arrest of these people? I don't know what he did. I couldn't tell him. You know, also this lady with the traffic tickets, eventually I did help her go, but I needed to go personally before a judge with her so she could pay her fine.
Well, as far as the guy that knew about the crime, somehow we've got to build that relationship to let that individual feel comfortable going to law enforcement. I know that there are many illegal immigrants here that are victims of a crime that are reported to Travis County. I know that for a fact.
Hello, I have my own story about my own family being deported, but instead of talking about my own story, I would like to talk about one that I heard in the Hado Detention Center as part of a visitation program of a young woman, possibly like maybe 2 or 3 years older than I am, who fled Honduras because of domestic violence and rape, and when in her across the border was actually picked up by a gang and raped repeatedly, left without clothes, and she escaped. And she fled and found a house that actually gave her a shirt and some underwear, but basically almost naked. She crossed the border, and immediately after finding a police officer, she actually told him the whole story, and immediately she was detained. She has been in the detention center for over 6 months. And I was wondering if you can explain to me, what is the humanity to these laws and to these systems? Do you see how people are being completely ripped apart from the inside out, and do you understand what women are fleeing and what they're trying to do to make themselves better and be able to survive?
Well, number one, I want you to know that my wife is from Belize, and my wife has family in Honduras. So we are aware of the crime that's over in Honduras. But I believe that there's legal ways to get here. And I know that you'll say that the system is because I hear it all the time, that it's real hard trying to get over here. But my job is to do everything possible to keep this community safe. And again, we will go back to the drawing board and sit down and have a conversation with my friends to my left.
There's no system for anyone who doesn't have resources. And that's like the woman who left fleeing domestic violence, she's not going to have the resources.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Darren from the Democratic Party for allowing us to be here tonight. I'm Pablo Ortiz. I'm 5th generation, or maybe rather, my family, there's 5 generations of Democrats, progressive Democrats. My great-grandmother was a Democrat when Texas was a republic. So, Democrats, hey, all power to us. Most important, I'd like to tell you, I have an education, and I've been educated through the educational process here in the United States. To me, the word immigrant means somebody that came in through Ellis Islands and waved at the Statue of Liberty. That's an immigrant. And to me, an American is anybody that was born in North America, Central America, South America. There's people that we are calling immigrants for Americans. And to go further, they were here building this beautiful building. They were out there building the streets that we took to get here. Okay, my time's up. My question is, where did we mess up in our morality as Americans? This is not right. This is not acceptable, whether there's a law or not, whether we say, the details of this or that. It is not morality. It's not right. It is not right. It's a fundamental right for Americans to be here. And they have a right to be here. So where is the difference in our morality? Where do we miss our educational process that doesn't make us gel together and accept them as Americans, which they are? The builders of the American dream, that's what they are.
Where's our morality? Is that the question?
Yeah, where can we differ? That we have to deport us. They're Americans. Where do we differ?
I mean, I think, where's our morality? I think that, we need to focus on where our local community morality is at, right? We know that the immigration system is broken, and we know that the fact that if we continue to participate in this broken law enforcement agency, right, then we will continue to separate families. We'll continue to be broken in our morality. That's, again, what we're saying, And what the sheriff was saying right before, is that he would say that he would sit down with his friends to the left and say, yes, it's us, right? And we would try to fix this issue, right? We would try to make sure that Travis County is actually a safe and secure place for everyone, right? And that's what we want. That's what I'm sure the sheriff wants, right? We want a safe and secure Travis County for absolutely everyone. And we don't want anyone to be scared to call the cops because of their document status. We don't want them to be scared of deportation. We want folks to be safe. And that is, I think, what we're pushing for, right?
We've gone over our allotted time. Let me just, again, thank the panel for being here. Thank you all for being here. I know this is an incredibly important conversation, and I appreciate everybody taking part in it. Let me just say a couple of other things. Number one, vote. 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 On Monday is the first day of early voting. There is a rally, an early vote rally at Zaragoza Park at 5 o'clock. I hope you'll join us there. I hope you'll get all of your friends and your family there, because that is the way we can change this country. We change the people who represent us. Second, I wanted to mention that I do have these flyers outside for this Tejano Dance and Rally with Leticia Vanderpute on Sunday, October 19th from 5:30 to 11 at the Night Rodeo. I hope everyone will be there. And finally, let me just wish you all a good night. And again, say I hope that you will continue the conversation with us. We appreciate the fact that the sheriff and Major Long are willing to be here and talk to us about this, and that they are willing to continue the conversation.
Sheriff Hamilton, do you have the name of that case? We can yell it out to you.
The only thing